renderforest.com.
Hi all, I'm Trisha Peach, host of the Peach Buzz. I'm so glad that you're back this week, and we are going to talk about a hot button topic, and this blew up on my blog when I first broached the subject. We're going to talk about church-sponsored babysitting or child care for every single event. Every children's pastor has dealt with this as far as I know, and it can be extremely frustrating. So a little background, back mainly in the 80s is when this started. The 1980s, churches started offering babysitting or child care for every single event. And parents began to accept it. We trained them that they needed to, or that we would provide child care for everything. And it was, if we don't provide the child care, they won't show up. They won't come to whatever it is, the meeting, live worship night, a comedian comes, like all these different things. Now the problem comes in is when you have a ton of events, which our church absolutely does. There's a lot of events, and I understand a church can be moving and grooving and getting a lot of things done. But when you start having events about every night of the week, and you expect your children's pastor or your children's director team to take care of childcare for all of those events, it can lead to a whole lot of problems, which is what we want to talk about today. I want to address that elephant in the room first off, that if you don't provide childcare, they won't come. I am a parent. I have 2 children, and I always knew that, okay, the church will just provide all my childcare when I go there. But when I wanted to go on a date or I wanted to go to a mom's meeting at the school, I had to find my own babysitter. And it didn't kill me. It really didn't. If I wanted to be there, I found a way to be there. And I want to make a point that we trained people to be this way, and we can train them to be a different way. We've trained them to expect childcare at every single event. Secondly, very, very important, for your children's director or your children's pastor and the volunteers that are really called to this. I mean the ones that are your diehards. They are holding up your arms week by week. They're called there. This is their ministry, whether they're paid or not. And this is their ministry. And many times they're saying to their volunteers or the people around them, we don't do babysitting. We don't do childcare. I am doing ministry. I am doing children's ministry. So usually then the press back from leadership at the church may be, well, this is ministry. This is ministry. We're doing childcare, babysitting so that the parents can be ministered to. And I see what they're saying. I kind of see what they're saying. And you will get that press back of, well, this is ministry, and I get that. Some people have really taken that childcare to new heights, that they are using it as their outreach ministry. I, however, am talking about just straight up childcare so that the adults can be ministered to. The problem that comes, there's so many problems with this. The one that immediately comes to mind is it's the same people that sign up for everything in the church. Am I wrong? They sign up to do everything. It's that 80-20%, 20% of the people in the church doing 80% of the work. So your same volunteers are the ones signing up to keep doing the childcare. So it may have started off 1 event a month, and then it was 2 events a month, and now it's 2 or 3 times a week. And you have the same leaders that are signing up for that, and they're getting burnt out. They will burn out, and then you don't have them for Sunday. I cannot emphasize this enough. Sunday morning is your go time. Weekend ministry is your go time. That's why you're there, not to be childcare for the sewing group on Tuesday night. And I don't think you can grow to a point, but at some point you have to say, what are our priorities? And this is what we're going to focus on, and you cannot do everything well. So what's going to happen is your weekend services will take a hit. You need to ask yourself why you're there, what is your calling, And what are we going to do when we can't do it all? And you can't. I had been saying that for years at one church I had worked at, and it was quite the battle. They said, well, the children's department has always done the childcare. Children's department has always done all the babysitting. But we had grown and grown so much. This was not the same church anymore. And I lost some key leaders. I lost some incredible volunteers, and it was stinging because we felt that on Sunday mornings. And they just said, we're burnt out. We can't do any more childcare. We're so burnt out. And then the press back from the leadership was, oh, well, this is ministry. And they said, yeah, but that's not what I signed up for. It's a bait and a switch is what happens. You tell these people, you're not going to be babysitting. You're going to change lives for the kingdom of God. And they come on for Sunday morning, and they're excited for Sunday morning, and then you put them in on doing coloring sheets on Thursday night for the bowling team. This is a big mistake because you may lose some of your most called, energetic volunteers. The other thing that I heard was the children's team has to do it because otherwise we will get people in there that have not been background checked. The way we got around that, and by the way, if you're wondering if there's hope, we got around it, and I'm going to tell you how we did it. There is hope in all of this. What we did is we had a volunteer coordinator, and it took me a long time to train this person up. I'm not saying this is easy. It takes time, but it's worth it. It's worth it. If you can imagine in your head what your ministry would look like if you no longer had to do all the childcare and babysitting, and you could focus just on the ministry that God has called you to do. If God has called you to do the childcare and babysitting, and that is your ministry and that's your key, fantastic. But for a lot of us, myself included, that Sunday morning is go time. That's when we got to get it done. I don't have time to be babysitting. I don't have time to do tons of childcare. So what we decided is we raised this girl up, and she did a fantastic job. We gave her a list of all the people in our church that had been background checked and fingerprinted, but who were not currently active in the kids ministry. So she had background checked, fingerprinted people, and our key leaders on Sunday morning and Wednesday nights got to just do their ministry. It was phenomenal. It was absolutely such a relief, such a weight off of my shoulders, a relief for all of my key volunteers, because the childcare and the babysitting was now taken care of and getting done. And we could concentrate on weekend ministry, which as we were growing was taking more and more and more and more time. I need to emphasize this, that it's balanced. There are always going to be some events that you do need to provide childcare for, and it takes wisdom to know which ones. For us, it had to be an all-church event, meaning the senior pastor is going to talk to the whole congregation. This is a special Sunday night meeting, so we will get childcare for that. It was not going to be like it had been before. Childcare for the worship team meeting, childcare for the Sunday morning greeters, childcare for everything under the sun. Secondly, we learned to say no, which is really difficult. We trained people that there would be childcare for absolutely everything under the sun. And then it was difficult having to say, no, I'm sorry, we've grown to this point, we cannot provide it for everything anymore. You will have to work with this lady. We gave them her name and number and see what she can do. Some of them chose to move it off-site to their homes. There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like I think our knitting group moved to someone's home so the kids could run and play, and there's nothing wrong with that. So you have to decide which ones do we really need to provide childcare for. I think an all-church worship night, yeah, that would be a good one to provide childcare for. The bowling group, probably not. They could find their own teenager, hire a teenager to watch their kids while they go out. I would say an all-church event would be one that you would have childcare for. So you have to learn how to say no. People can be trained that they should not expect childcare at every single thing. You can train them that way. It just takes time. You have to be consistent and you have to communicate and you have to explain this is the new direction we're going in because we're growing and we're putting our focus on Sundays. If you haven't read the book Simple Church, go get it. Go get it on Amazon and read it. It's a fantastic book. It will help streamline, but it talks a lot about making Sunday go time. Sunday is the weekend service. That's your go time. That's what you got to put your time and effort into. We need to talk about another thing that I don't know if you've considered is liability. Churches tend to provide childcare for every single thing under the sun, and it just quadruples your church's liability. Your insurance for your church is already pretty high. I already know that. Liability insurance, someone trips and falls and gets hurt. One church I worked at, we had the Spanish church was using the building in the afternoon. The Hmong church was using the church on Sunday evenings. The deaf church was using the building on Monday nights. And we did, in 2 of those different churches, we had an injury where the child was injured and our church insurance has to pay out because it's our building. And you have to think about that too, because if they do not have background checked, fingerprinted people in there when they have services, you're still liable. You say, well, that's not fair. It's your building. So you are still liable. You want to think about that because every time you have babysitting going on there or childcare, if something goes wrong, your church is liable. So the more you can limit that childcare and babysitting, the better. And you need to know who is in there, who is using your building. I would be asking some major questions as to, are these people fingerprinted, background checked? Because we think, well, they're liable. No, they're not. It's your building. You're liable. You have the building insurance. That's what's going to be kicking in. Also for injuries. You know, a child falls and gets hurt. That happens all the time. And you're liable. So you really want to know who you have in there. So for some of these groups, like the knitting group, we said, if you do it in a house and hire your own teenager, that's fine. If they had them on the site, on the church site, and they hired a teenager, now we've increased the liability a bit, because if some child gets hurt and they sue the church, and then there was a teenager in there and there wasn't enough help. And I wish we didn't have to think about these things, but it is something we do need to think about, is keeping our kids safe. We need to keep our kids safe. One lawsuit can demolish a church's resources. So I really, really want to encourage you to limit the childcare and babysitting that you have on site. If it's a smaller, not all church group, have them meet in homes with their own hired babysitter. Do not do it on the church property. I would say you need to have childcare for an all church event. I had a volunteer childcare coordinator that handled all that, and it was phenomenal. Which leads me to my next point. You will have to then really work to lead up training the other staff. You have to remember that the other staff, possibly the student ministries pastor, worship pastor, senior pastor, all of them, I was on a large staff, they all have been trained that the children's pastor does all the childcare. I don't know where that got written down, but somehow people have that in their head. I did answer once. I said to the worship pastor, I said, so you're going to come in and do all our sound now for every one of our events? He's like, no, why would I do that? I said, exactly. Why am I coming in to do childcare for all of your events, the small events, and you're not here for all my small events leading worship, you know? Then I think they got it more, but I said, this is a team. We need to do teamwork. Let's think teamwork. We're burning people out. And I started giving them options. You don't just come in and say, no, that's not going to work. You say, how can we compromise? How can we give them options? So I was saying, here's the lady you need to call. Here, we've got background checked, fingerprinted people that she's going to be working with. Here are the liability issues you really need to think of. And once I explained this, several of the staff members went, oh, well, we'll just move it off site at so-and-so's house. I was like, thanks, that would be great. Some of them hired their own 2 people. Some of them worked with this girl. The problem we ran into was they would call this girl and say, I'm having an event in 6 days. I need babysitters. And she's going, we had to train them. You need to contact her maybe a month in advance, 3 weeks in advance. You've got to be courteous. 6 days? Because there were so many events happening almost every night. But they learned. That's the point. They learned. It takes time to retrain, time to do some retraining, and they learned. But you can't just go in and say, forget it. No, we are a team. And if you explain the situation, I have seen children's pastors that are not very good at communicating cross teams. They're not explaining how badly their leaders are burned out with babysitting, and they're not explaining the problem. And can I also say, you may have to explain it many, many, many times. The first time I fought for a volunteer child care coordinator, I was turned down. I went and rewrote the proposal, proposed it again the next year, was turned down. I went back and I rewrote the proposal and I showed the increase in our numbers and the volunteers that dropped off, and I listed who they were and that they dropped off due to the child care stuff. I was turned down. The 4th one I turned in with all my numbers and ducks in a row, I got approved, and it was worth every minute of the fight and every graph that we made. So if I can encourage you, at the very least, relook at the way your church is approaching childcare and babysitting. Are you doing it for every single event or just for all church events? Are you doing it on site? Do you have fingerprint and background check people? Have you considered the liability part of it? Can you train up a volunteer coordinator to take some of that on? And let me finish with this. This is a great teaching tool for the other members of the staff and the congregation, that you want quality and excellence in everything you do, and the value of your children's ministry team. I know it's frustrating. I know it is hurtful when the other staff or the pastor only view you as a babysitter. They don't see your value. They don't see the value maybe of the children's ministry. You really can't blame them if they don't understand what's going on in there. Like, this is Earth and you're the moon, and you're trying to relay what's going on the moon. They're not in your neighborhood. They're in the main service. They don't see what you see. So you have to become so good at communicating what's going on. You can't blame them if you haven't communicated this. And they say that they have to hear it 8 times before it actually registers. So you need to keep communicating and communicating effectively. But this is a time to say, I know what's happened in the past, but right now, bring them to now, we are aiming for excellence. We are aiming for impact. And the value of what we're doing is going to mean I need all volunteers on deck, and I need people called to this. We are going to move away from doing all the child care and babysitting and put our effort on weekend ministry. And when I've explained that to senior leadership, they tend to go, oh, okay, that sounds good. So it's not that they're like, I don't care about the kids ministry. They need you to explain what's going on over there, because how do they know? They're not in that service. It'd be great to invite them to watch many times. And sometimes they just panic saying, oh, if you don't do all the childcare, no one's going to show up. And when they realized that wasn't true, we had one all-church meeting that our childcare workers both got sick right beforehand. People got their own sitters and no one seemed to notice. No one died. The ceiling did not fall in, and we had a good turnout. So what I'm saying is, if people freak out, don't give up. Keep leading up. Keep speaking the value of kids ministry, speaking the value of what you do, and calling people alongside you to make that weekend go time. That's your go time. I'd say to work hard to cut everything else as far back as you can, because your weekend is your go time. So I hope this gives you a little bit to work with. I know it's a massive issue. When I put it on my blog, it blew up. I mean, thousands of hits, people just on both sides of it. If you want to check it out on my blog is Peach with just the letter T on WordPress. but hang in there. Thank you for all you do for Jesus and his kids. And I hope that this week someone sees the quality and the value of what you do in ministry. Love you, and I'll see you next week on the Peach Buzz. Bye.